Bassett, and a retired college administrator who continues to teach courses in Black history on topics of equity, diversity, and inclusion. Of all of her accomplishments, there are several, lots, but she was recently inducted into the 100 accomplished Black Canadian women. Irene was born and raised and currently resides in Windsor, Ontario, with her husband Rodney, who she fondly refers to as Mr. Davis. If you want to know more about Irene, just be on social media or listen to AM 800 or any of the media around town. And because Irene is so accomplished that her bio could be longer than the next 6 meetings. So I am pleased to introduce Rotarian, active community member, and wonderful lady, Irene Moore-Davis.
Thank you. You are so sweet. We're all just so sweet. Okay.
Actually, she didn't write it. Apparently Phyllis sent me one, and I but I didn't end up getting it, and this was courtesy of my wonderful husband.
That was so sweet. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to be talking today about building diverse and inclusive organizations, and I'm not delivering this presentation specifically with respect to Rotary Windsor St. Clair. I'm hoping that it will be something you can apply to any organization in which you're involved, including workplaces, if that makes sense to you. So diversity and inclusion are topics that are often misunderstood. I'm just wondering how many people in the room have been through any kind of equity, diversity, and inclusion training or workshop in the last 2 to 3 years.
Oh,
A lot of you. Yes, a lot of you have, and I'm sure that there will be some common themes and possibly some overlap, but I'm going to try to keep this general in a sense, but also very specific in terms of applicable ideas and strategies. So diversity and inclusion are often quite misunderstood. They're often believed to be kind of synonymous, and they are not. They're complementary, but they're very distinct. So diversity refers to, I have to look up here because I'm like old and tired. Diversity refers to the variety of similarities and differences among people, including but not limited to things like gender, gender identity, ethnicity, race, native or indigenous origin, depending how your terminology is where you live, age, generation, sexual orientation, culture, religion, etc. But it also can apply to things like education, level of education, geography, work style, work experience, job role and function, personality type. So diversity can mean a lot of things. It's basically having a bunch of different kinds of people in the room or in the space. Inclusion is a little bit different from that. Inclusion is a dynamic state of operating in which diversity is leveraged to create a fair, healthy, and high-performing organization or workplace or community. An inclusive environment ensures equitable access to resources and opportunities for everyone. And it also enables individuals and groups to feel safe and respected and valued and engaged and motivated for who they are and for their contributions, not for all being the same, right? When we have an inclusive organization or an inclusive space, we're respecting everybody's differences. Diversity is the what and inclusion is the how. I really love this quote. Diversity focuses on the makeup of your workforce or your organization, demographics such as gender, race, ethnicity, etc. But inclusion is something that enables a diverse group to thrive together. So now we kind of talk about belonging a little bit. Diversity is sort of having a seat at the table. Inclusion is having a voice, but belonging is actually having that voice be heard and valued. So we want to kind of frame diversity, inclusion, and belonging as an opportunity, not a problem, whether, again, we're talking about a club or an organization or a workplace or whatever kind of group of people coming together. We want to frame it as an opportunity, not a problem. Sometimes you hear language that's kind of based on a concept, an underlying concept that, oh my gosh, we've got to increase our diversity. How are we going to do this? Like it's a problem. It's actually an opportunity. And we really want to cultivate an inclusive culture and understand that it's actually good for our organizations. It creates better generation of ideas, better diversity of opinions and perspectives, and all of that really good stuff that leads to better decision making, better outcomes. We certainly want to build, sort of build a situation in which members can thrive individually and bring out the best in each other. And it's really good to invest in equity, diversity, and inclusion. I don't mean monetarily, but I mean in terms of time, energy, effort, thinking through how we make any organization more inclusive. So consider it something to invest in as a long-term strategy, not something we're doing just because everybody's doing that now. And we want to treat it as a core value, not just necessarily a policy statement, and certainly not in terms of coming up with a quota system or anything like that. It's just a core value that we want to be as diverse and inclusive as we possibly can. So I'd like us to kind of think about the difference between culture add and culture fit. Sometimes when we're out for whatever kind of organization, not just the club, sometimes we're kind of out there recruiting or selecting people based on who fits into our existing culture. Like who would be a good fit with us? Who would make sense in terms of this group and kind of align with everything we already think and believe and all of our ways of doing things and all of our ways of self-expression, as opposed to someone who can add to the culture, add new ideas and new energy to the culture. So think about culture add and not culture fit. When we get to the topic of equity, just so we understand the terminology we're using today, equity is fair treatment, access, opportunity, and advancement for all people, while at the same time striving to identify and eliminate any barriers that may have prevented the full participation of certain groups. So equity is the process, and when we have equity in place as the process, then equality is more likely to be the result. So why does all of this matter? Diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging, and so on. So whatever kind of organization we're referring to, and I'm going to speak about a nonprofit basically as the core idea today. Membership should be a reflection of an organization's values and beliefs about who should be included or involved, but also who should be ultimately empowered and entrusted with its important decisions. So we don't just want to grow membership that is diverse and grow an inclusive organization where there's a lot of different kinds of people who feel valued, but we want to make sure that we're also empowering and trusting different kinds of people with our important decisions. We can better achieve our mission in the community when we draw on the skills and talents and perspectives of a broader and more diverse range of people, because we exist in a diverse community. So we want to make sure that we reflect that community. The diversity of viewpoints that comes from different life experiences and cultural backgrounds can actually strengthen our discussions, our sharing of ideas, our deliberations, and our decision-making, and that leads to better outcomes inevitably. So I think a culture of inclusion can also help us build systems that support trust, candor, and respect. And I'm saying that because sometimes, and I'm not talking about this organization, once again, sometimes we see that there's a lot of diversity in our organization, but people don't feel trusted or that they can be honest or authentic or that they'll achieve equal respect if they are fully themselves with the majority of the group. Organizations that cultivate an inclusive culture ensure that every member is equally encouraged to bring their perspectives, their identity, and their life experiences to their service. An inclusive organizational culture will definitely welcome and celebrate differences rather than trying to dial them back or making people feel like they've got to kind of hide themselves to fit in. And we want to ensure that every member is given equal opportunity to be engaged and invested and to share power and responsibility for the organization's mission. Not just to be present in the room, but to have equal involvement in sharing power and responsibility. Diverse members definitely help organizations to understand the context in which they work, especially in a diverse community. So organizations can better prioritize resources and strategies for achieving the mission. For example, in a workplace situation, if everybody who's in a particular workplace is kind of reflecting the same set of identities, then they're not necessarily able to reach out and relate to customers, clients, or people they come into contact that represent other identities. So it's good to reflect the group that you're working with. An organization that is unaware of how systemic inequities have affected our society and the communities that are served by the organization will be more likely to design flawed strategies and to continue replicating inequities. And an organization that is diverse and inclusive is definitely in a better position to achieve community impact and relevance. I'd really like us to kind of pay attention to this slide here, cults versus cultures. So a group that's connected by appreciation for the same thing, person, or ideal can kind of go in either way. If you have to think and behave a certain way to belong, it's more like a cult. But if you're allowed to think how you choose and to contribute your thoughts and your perspectives to the group, then we're looking more at the culture perspective. I want to touch a little bit on implicit bias and unconscious bias. Those of you who have had EDI training of any kind, I'm sure have run into this terminology before. But when we talk about implicit bias or unconscious bias, we're talking about sort of what happens when we allow our own long-standing, deeply held attitudes, feelings, stereotypes, beliefs to impact our judgment or our understanding of the people that we're encountering. It's called unconscious bias because we're not doing it on purpose or blatantly or voluntarily. It's an involuntary process that's based on our deep-seated thoughts. So, for example, I might run into a group of rambunctious young men on the street and make assumptions about them that are based on deeply held fears or beliefs that I've had for a long time that I'm not thinking about consciously, but that just exist within me. So implicit bias can be based on any number of characteristics, things like race and age, social group, appearance, how many tattoos a person has, whatever. But it can also be based on things like height or weight or marital status or children or any of those other things, political affiliations. How many times have we run into somebody who's wearing a certain hat, for example, and we make assumptions? Like I run into people that are dressed as though they support the Maple Leafs, and I'm like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like I just make assumptions. That could be wrong. So, I mean, some of our biases are born as early as childhood, and later they can be strengthened by things like the education system, our friends, coworkers, entertainment, even media reports. You know, this is why many of us are concerned about sort of how much negative coverage there is of certain racialized groups or things of that nature in the media. So things to watch out for in particular when we're thinking about increasing diversity and inclusion in our membership or our workforce or whatever is affinity bias, which is a tendency to sort of be more receptive to people who remind us of ourselves, right? We always want to kind of counter that tendency. If we heard a job recruiter saying, I heard that person because she reminded me of my sister, we would say, well, that's insane. You can't hire people because they remind you of your sister. But we kind of do that stuff all the time when we're selecting board members, when we're selecting people we want to recruit for any reason. So just a few things to think about. We want to build an organization that's inclusive, not just diverse. It's not just having a bunch of different people in the room. It's making sure that everyone feels valued and is valued equally. And examine our day-to-day practices, kind of be reflective about how inclusive we're being and see where there might be some blind spots or some areas where we can improve. And really a great question to always ask ourselves is, do members or workers have to hide or mask poor parts of themselves to fit in? If somebody can't be authentically themselves around us, then we haven't really built an inclusive space. I would recommend for anyone in a workplace or whatever environment that you develop goals for diversity and inclusion, because we all know that what gets measured gets done. So it's not necessarily a system of quotas that I'm talking about, but sort of what kind of goals have you set that would make a place more inclusive? Does anyone have any examples that you can refer to in terms of your workplace or any other organization with which you're involved where there's actually been a strategy or a goal to make the place more inclusive? Yes.
Well, we just really looked at the community that we serve and where we are. And it took a few years, but we were able to then populate and it wasn't a quota thing, but it was like, we wanted to be able to make sure that when we went into people's homes, that they felt comfortable and they were represented as well. So we were able to populate our family selection committee and our board, and it's very reflective of our community, like. Yeah, so, but it took a long time because for years, we were pretty homogenous. We were a pretty homogenous group, but we really did the exercise and we did the work, and now we're very reflective. And you know, our board is, we have Kevin McShann just joined our board, and you know, so he's on my family selection committee now, so it's amazing because he really helps us with our with helping our families with disabilities. So
Well, John, we.
Thank you. I think a few years ago, it was more contentious of how we handle race here in the club. It's less of an issue today, and now we've gone to reflections instead of race, which I think is more inclusive than non-Christian members to come to our club and feel more comfortable. I think that's one step that we have made consciously or unconsciously to be more welcome to people.
Yes, that's a really great example. Yeah.
Well, just because I deal with such a lot of younger people at our, most of our hiring now is multinational, international. We had to develop strategies because our customer base is, there's the diversity that we needed to learn from our employees, because the different cultures, we had to learn how to, you just don't go around hugging everyone, like we're not all me, right? We're not all LAs. And there were a lot of things that we learned from our employees that help us as the older homogenized office people to learn how, what we need to change to make our customers comfortable, right? To deal with different customers. And we learn a lot from our staff because our staff is a rainbow right now. It's quite interesting, and they have a lot to teach us.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot to learn from each other. And I like the reference that you made to sort of going around hugging everybody as your default setting, which is very lovely.
Yeah.
But people of different cultures and identities have very different ideas about personal space, right?
Yeah, and it's something that you learn from your younger employees about how they interact with eye contact, and they teach our white Anglo-Saxon employees these things too. So it's really working out really nicely. And there's a lot of respect for that.
Yes, and intergenerational learning is so important as well. How are we doing for time?
We're good. We're good.
Yeah, so you have more, so. Okay. Yeah, sorry, one of you had your hand up. One thing too, it's terrible.
I was just gonna say, one of the, yeah. Couple of things.
Oh, we're gonna get you guys good teaser.
Now, one of the great examples, I think, and you've probably heard this in the past, is Mark Wafer, the Tim Hortons franchisee owner from the Whitby area or Toronto area, who for years hired persons with disabilities for his stores, and was hugely successful, not only from a community standpoint, but also he got tremendous value out of these employees. I mean, they just really wanted to work. So, and it really said something about him and about the organization itself.
Yeah, very cool.
So, I need to be the party pooper, but, so, as most of you know, I'm sure, I'm an immigrant here. That's been 20 years, but, you're hearing a lot of, it's always personal, so justice letting a lot of immigrants in. I usually say, yeah, the good thing is, I'm one of them. But I'm getting, I'm starting to get pushed back. On Fox News, Trump, etc. On, this month is Pride Month. People have told me. I'm kind of upset that RBC is like all in pride. Sorry. So. You seem to be a lot more subtle than I am, so is there a polite? Subtle way to try, not that we're gonna bring all those people back to. Whatever you want, you know, having an open mind, but. What are some of the? Is there any verbiage that we can use? That we don't, you know, when we run into these people that are telling us something that's not completely, you know. And their clients, whatever, so I can't say I'm not up to verbiage that we can fight a little bit, but not escalate to get into big group or not, right? Is there anything like that that we can use in our day-to-day lives? Like, say,
Sure, I mean, in a customer interaction especially, we do have to be careful, but I mean, it's also a core value and a deeply held belief in most of our organizations that we are about equity and justice and inclusion at this point. So I would just say to someone in that circumstance, for example, I understand that there are a lot of different perspectives, but this is something that our company chooses to do because we believe in protecting the rights of everyone. Or, you know, that we want to ensure that there are equal rights for everyone. And I think that it's kind of hard for folks to argue with that. Some people will try, but I mean, I think that if you connect it to your company values and that this is about fairness, it's not about prioritizing one group over another or valuing one group over another, but it's about just sort of making sure that there's a fair, even playing field for everyone. It's hard for people to argue with that, I find. Do you agree?
I think they will. I mean, people are. There are some people you just cannot convert, right?
COVID created a bunch of monsters, and I have some in my family
Sure.
that you can't even talk to them. Emily lost two of her best friends because you can't even carry a conversation on any longer because it's always on attack. So.
And two of our other friends who are part of that group are in the same gender relationship. And they're now being chastised by these other friends who have supposedly been friends since they were this tall. You know, it's just,
That's hard.
it's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. Hey,
Just wondering what your thoughts are on the same line that Thomas was mentioning. There's a big pushback now in the US against this woke culture
yeah.
and against affirmative action, universities and all that kind of stuff. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I
Scream
mean,
out loud. No. Sorry.
I think that, shifting a culture is a very hard thing. You have to take a very long view, and there's always going to be pushback when anyone perceives that their privilege or their influence is waning. And we have to kind of expect that, but counter it. I think we counter it with fair arguments and with wisdom and with kindness. We're not going to win every argument, but I think that, pushback is natural. Anytime there's been a social movement that has made things better for a wider number of people, there's always going to be someone who's upset about it. Perceived loss of privilege is a big deal. It's one of the reasons why we want to monitor the comment section, online, in our workplaces, in our organizations, to understand that, if we're starting to behave in more equitable and fair and just ways and to introduce more inclusive practices, somebody's going to be upset. And we can't just sort of ignore that. We have to learn how to work with those people and bring them along so that they have a better understanding. But I mean, I think that the concern about woke culture is basically related to people feeling very fearful, and the less afraid we can make people feel, the easier it will be to move these things forward. Time. Oh, is it time for the honey?
You can call me honey, you can. Irene, you made a very complex subject, very clear and reasonable, and I thank you for that. We have a very big job ahead of us, and I would just suggest that when we say the 4-way test at the end of the meeting,
we think about DEI, because that's exactly what it is.
Yes,
And
yeah.
if we all did DEI or all did the four-way test, the world would be such a better place.
Yeah.
And everyone would be included. That's really important. So thank you for this, and thank you for your advocacy and all things to make the community better.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it. Thank you.